I'm Michelle, 21, and I worked two jobs to get myself back into college after everything fell apart. For years, I played the good daughter, quiet, reliable, never asked for much. But when my parents used my college fund to pay for my brother's third divorce and told me he needed it more, I made a decision that changed everything. Ever been overlooked by the people you thought would always have your back? If you've had to choose yourself after being betrayed, share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before we get into it, drop where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw a line and stick to it, tap like and subscribe for more real stories about walking away and reclaiming your voice. Because what happened next caught everyone off guard. My name is Michelle Connors, and for as long as I can remember, I was the one who didn't make waves. The quiet one. The reliable one. The easy kid. I did my homework, kept my room clean, helped out without being asked. And that became my role in the family by default. Evan, my older brother by 4 years, was something else entirely. Loud, impulsive, chaotic. A storm with legs and a short fuse. He had 3 speeding tickets by the time he turned 20 and managed to crash my dad's car the night before Thanksgiving when he was 17. He's just got a lot on his mind, Mom told the insurance adjuster. Teenage boys act out, it's normal. That was the story. Evan was normal. His messes were normal. His bad decisions, his dropped classes, his impulsive marriages, and equally impulsive divorces, those were treated like growing pains. Just part of his process. When he dropped out of college in his second year, Dad shrugged and said, "College isn't for everyone." Meanwhile, I was pulling straight A's at a public magnet school, competing in mock trial, and volunteering at the library every Saturday. I never got into trouble, never made a scene. And the response I got was always the same, a tight-lipped smile, a distracted, "good job, honey," and then a pivot right back to Evan. There was always a fire to put out with Evan. Our family wasn't wealthy, but we were stable. Suburban house in Maryland, 2 used cars, family dinner on Sundays. My mom was a nurse. My dad worked in IT. We didn't do fancy vacations, but there was structure, and there was always a sense that things were taken care of. At least for Evan. I was 12 when I first heard about the college fund. It wasn't a big conversation, just something my dad mentioned in passing when I brought home a flyer about a summer science camp. "We're putting a little aside for your college," he said while glancing at the electric bill. "Not a lot, but it'll help when the time comes." I held onto that. Tightly. Not because of the money exactly, but because it felt like proof that they believed in me too. That I wasn't just the helper or the extra set of hands when things got bad with Evan. I was a person with a future worth planning for. Every year after that, I'd check in gently around tax time. "Still saving for college?" I'd ask, and my mom would say, "Of course. We haven't forgotten." And I believed them. Through high school, I kept working. After-school job at a frozen yogurt place, AP classes, National Honor Society. I stayed out of the way when Evan went through his first divorce, just a year after getting married. The whole thing was a disaster. He moved back in with us for 6 months and slept until noon every day. I tiptoed around him, even though it was my senior year and I barely had room to study at the kitchen table. My parents gave him space. They bought him new clothes. They paid for therapy. "He's going through something," Mom said. "He needs support." I was never told I needed support. I was told I was mature. I could handle things. I was responsible. That year, I won a state-level scholarship for girls in STEM. When the letter came in the mail, my dad handed it to me and said, "Nice. That'll help." No one took me out to dinner. No one posted about it. Evan had totaled his second car the week before, so the mood in the house was low. That was the pattern. My wins always had to take a back seat to his losses. I got into every college I applied to, but I chose a solid state university with a strong pre-med track, mostly because I wanted to make their money stretch as far as possible. I didn't want to be a burden. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one night in late April, going over tuition numbers with my mom. "With the college fund and scholarships, I think I can avoid loans for at least the first 2 years," I said, showing her the spreadsheet I'd made. She didn't look up from her tea. "We'll figure it out," she said vaguely. I felt a flicker of doubt, but I brushed it off. Maybe they didn't want to talk numbers just yet. Maybe they were waiting for the FAFSA to come through. That spring, Evan got married again. His second wife, Alana, was younger, worked retail, and had 2 kids from a previous relationship. The wedding was in our backyard. Small, last minute, barely catered. I helped string the lights. My mom was so proud, even though the whole thing felt thrown together. "He's trying to build a stable life," she said, eyes glassy with hope. They split before their 1-year anniversary. She took the kids and moved to Ohio. Evan went back to living in our basement. It would have been easy to resent him, but I didn't. Not at first. I felt sorry for him, honestly. He seemed lost, like someone always looking for the next rescue. I spent that summer before college working full-time at a pharmacy to save for books and living expenses. My best friend, Clara, and I made weekly checklists for what we'd need on campus. Shower caddy, twin XL sheets, power strip, the normal stuff. I found a used laptop online for $300 and felt like I was ahead of the game. I didn't splurge on anything. I was careful. I wanted to make my parents proud. I wanted to show them I was worth the investment. At the end of July, I asked my dad if we could sit down and go over the financial details. "I just want to understand how much of the tuition you guys are covering, so I know what I need to pick up in loans." He shifted in his chair and said, "We'll talk soon." There's just been a lot going on with Evan. There was always a lot going on with Evan. By mid-August, I still hadn't gotten a clear answer. I started getting nervous, but I didn't push. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I told myself they were just waiting for final numbers. That maybe they were planning to surprise me with a check the week before move-in. The week before move-in came and went. No surprise check. No sit down. And still, I said nothing. Because that's who I had always been. The quiet, reliable one. The girl who figured it out. Who waited her turn. Who didn't ask for more than she was given. Until it became impossible not to. I moved into my dorm without fanfare. No photos. No family send-off. My mom helped me carry in 1 box of clothes, then glanced at her phone and said she had to get back. Evan had a court date early the next morning. "Text us when you're settled," she said, hugging me quickly. "And remember, don't stress too much about money. We'll figure it out." That was the 3rd time she'd said it that week. But her tone was different now, flat, like she was saying it for her own benefit more than mine. The first bill came 2 weeks later. I'd already registered for classes, bought my textbooks used, and set up a payment plan for the housing fees. When I logged in to check my tuition account, it showed an outstanding balance. The college fund hadn't been applied yet. At first, I assumed it was just a delay. I waited another week. Still nothing. I emailed the bursar's office, who confirmed they hadn't received any payments or outside contributions. That night, I called home. "Hey, just wanted to check. Has the college fund been sent over yet?" They said nothing's come through. There was a long pause before Mom answered. "We've had a lot going on, honey. Your brother's legal stuff has been really time-consuming. I'll talk to your dad and see where things are." She didn't ask about my classes. Or if I needed anything. Or how I was sleeping in a tiny room with a girl who liked to blast music at 1 a.m. She said goodbye like she was already halfway out the door. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. My roommate, Sam, looked over from her desk. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said automatically. "Just my mom. She's distracted." The truth was, I already knew something wasn't right. I just didn't want to see it clearly yet. Every time I called home after that, the conversations were short. Dad barely picked up anymore, and when he did, it was always while he was driving Evan somewhere or waiting for Evan to finish up in court. "It's been a mess," he'd say, like I should understand. "He's really trying, Michelle." Trying. That was the word they used the most. He's trying to be a better father. He's trying to get his visitation rights. He's trying to stay sober. That one caught me off guard. I hadn't realized there was a relapse. Or maybe I had, and no one had said the words out loud before. Evan had always struggled to stay in one piece. He was charming in a way that made people want to give him the benefit of the doubt, until they realized he wasn't going to change. But Mom never seemed to realize. Or didn't want to. To her, Evan was still the little boy with the scraped knees who needed protecting. And I was the one who didn't need much. I kept working part-time in the campus library. I signed up for 2 research studies that paid $50 each. I started calculating how long I could go without buying anything beyond cafeteria meals. I didn't tell anyone back home. The cracks widened around midterms. Evan had started calling me late at night, not to check on me, but to vent. He'd go on for 20, 30 minutes about his ex, about the custody judge, about how unfair it was that he had to pay child support when he was basically unemployed. He always ended the call the same way. I know Mom and Dad are stretched thin, but I didn't think they'd leave me to drown like this. I said nothing. I wasn't sure if he even remembered I was in college now. Every time I mentioned school, he changed the subject. Once, I told him I was taking biology and psych that semester, thinking he might at least pretend to care. He just said, huh, and then launched into a story about how his ex was probably faking the therapy bills she kept sending over. I started dreading his calls. But I didn't block him. Thanksgiving break came, and I went home to find Evan's stuff scattered across the entire basement. Laundry piles, empty Red Bull cans, old food containers. It smelled like sweat and burnt toast. Mom acted like this was normal. She told me not to worry about it. He's in a rough place right now. It felt like I'd stepped back into a play that had never stopped running, even while I was gone. I tried to talk to my dad the next morning, just the 2 of us in the kitchen while the coffee brewed. Hey, I was wondering if we could talk about the college fund, I said carefully. He didn't look at me. We're still figuring things out, Michelle. You know how tight things are right now. Yeah, but I thought we had to make some decisions, he said, sharper this time. Evan needed legal help. There wasn't another option. I stood there, not saying anything. My face went hot, but my hands stayed cold. He poured his coffee and left the room like the conversation hadn't happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I got up to get some water and heard voices coming from the kitchen. I moved quietly, stopped just short of the doorway. She's going to figure it out soon, my mom was saying. She already has, my dad muttered. She's just not saying it yet. There was a clink of glass, maybe a spoon against a mug. We couldn't let him lose his kids, Tom, Mom whispered. It's not just him anymore. It's those boys too. There was silence. Then Dad again, low and tired. We used what was left. It's gone. I went back to my room, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like an hour. I don't remember if I cried. I don't think I did. It was too quiet for that. Too final. The next day, I went through the motions, helped Mom in the kitchen, watched a movie with Evan and pretended to laugh. I didn't mention what I'd heard. I didn't ask again. Because I already knew. They'd given away my future like it was spare change. Like it was something optional. Something that could be repurposed when Evan fell apart again. And I still hadn't told them I knew. Not yet. The conversation didn't happen the way I imagined it would. Not in a private moment or after some kind of apology. It wasn't a serious sit-down or even a one-on-one. It was just breakfast. I was home for winter break. Classes had ended a week earlier, and I'd taken the late bus in from campus. It had snowed overnight, and the kitchen smelled like coffee and cinnamon toast when I walked in. Evan was already at the table in one of Dad's old sweatshirts, tapping something into his phone, headphones in. Mom stood at the stove, flipping eggs with the same quiet efficiency she used to pack our lunches in middle school. I sat down, still half asleep, expecting small talk. Maybe a question about grades. Or if I needed laundry quarters. Instead, she said it like she was mentioning the weather. We had to use your fund. I blinked. What? She didn't turn around. Your college fund. We had to use it. Evan's situation is urgent. I couldn't tell if she meant to sound casual or if it just came out that way. My brain couldn't catch up. My mouth went dry. Then she turned, holding a plate, and set it in front of me. 2 scrambled eggs and a piece of toast with raspberry jam. He needs it more, she said, buttering her own slice. No apology. No explanation. Just that. Evan didn't even look up. He was watching a TikTok now, smiling at something on the screen. I stared at my plate. I couldn't move. My hands were in my lap, and I couldn't feel them. Mom sat down across from me like nothing had happened. "You'll be okay," she said, reaching for the milk. "You've always been resourceful." That was the moment. Not the money itself, not the months of silence or the slow unraveling. It was that sentence. That assumption that I'd absorb it. That I'd clean it up like I always had. That I'd make it work somehow. Alone. I looked at her. Really looked. She was spreading jam like we were talking about grocery lists. Like this was just a practical update. Her hair was pinned back, neat as always. Her sweater was one I hadn't seen before, soft green, probably something she picked up for herself after Christmas shopping. "I didn't even know there was a custody hearing," I said finally. "Well, it all happened quickly," she replied. "We didn't want to worry you during exams." Evan chuckled at something on his phone. She reached over and nudged his arm. "Eat before it gets cold." I pushed the plate away. My stomach had turned to concrete. "I have a tuition bill due in January." She looked surprised. Not guilty, just surprised, like I'd brought up something inconvenient she hadn't thought about. "We'll help where we can," she said. But right now, Evan's in the middle of a real crisis. The word real echoed in my head. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My face felt hot and my chest tight, but my voice wouldn't come. I stood up slowly, careful not to let the chair scrape too loudly. No one said anything. Not even goodbye. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room. The sheets were still stiff from being freshly washed. A pine-scented candle sat unopened on the dresser, probably put there for decoration. The silence pressed in around me like insulation. I stared at the carpet until the pattern blurred. She said he needed it more. There wasn't a part of me that didn't know this moment was coming. I'd heard them in the kitchen. I'd seen the evasions. But hearing it out loud was different. There's something final about a choice spoken plainly. I didn't cry. I wish I could say I did, but I didn't. It was like something had frozen over inside me. I picked up my phone, scrolled aimlessly. Texted Clara to ask if she was free for coffee. She said sure, maybe Thursday. When I finally came back downstairs that afternoon, Evan was asleep on the couch, half covered in a throw blanket. A Netflix show paused on the TV. Mom was on the phone with someone, I think a caseworker. She smiled when she saw me but didn't pause the call. I walked straight past them and out the front door. That night, I didn't eat dinner. No one asked where I was. I stayed holed up in the room, trying to finish a scholarship essay for a private foundation I'd found online. Describe a challenge you've overcome and how it shaped your goals. I stared at the blank document for 20 minutes and finally wrote, I have learned how to stretch disappointment into drive. How to absorb what people won't give you and still make something from it. It didn't feel good. It didn't even feel honest. But it was something. The next day, I overheard my dad talking to a neighbor. It's been rough with Evan, he said, his voice low and tired. We had to move some things around financially, but we're doing what needs to be done. Doing what needs to be done. Like that was noble. Like sacrificing my future for Evan's third emergency in 6 years was some act of parental courage. I didn't exist in the story, not really. Not as a person with her own trajectory. I was background. Quiet. Capable. Optional. I went back to campus early. 2 days before the break officially ended. I told them I needed to start work early, but the truth was I couldn't take being in that house another minute. I packed my bags while Mom was at Target with Evan. Left a note on the kitchen counter that just said, heading back, thanks for the visit. They didn't call. Classes started. I picked up an extra shift at the library and added another one at a local bookstore. The numbers in my bank account stayed stubbornly low. I started skipping meals to stretch what little I had. Still, I didn't tell anyone. Not Clara, not my roommate, not my professors. Because in my mind, saying it out loud made it real in a way I wasn't ready for. But every time I checked my tuition portal, the numbers stared back like an accusation. Every time I saw Evan's name pop up on my phone, I ignored it. Every time I got a text from Mom saying, "Hope school is going well," with a smiley face, I wanted to scream. She said he needed it more. Like that was the end of the conversation. And for them, maybe it was. I didn't go back for spring break. Clara invited me to her place in upstate New York. Her family had a drafty old cabin by a lake, and she swore it would be peaceful, just 2 days of Netflix, cheap wine, and avoiding our GPAs. I told her I had work and couldn't afford the time off, which wasn't entirely untrue. But the real reason was simpler. I couldn't stomach sitting across from my mother at the kitchen table again while she asked if I wanted more butter on my toast. I couldn't fake my way through another conversation with my father where I pretended not to notice him dodging my eyes. I wasn't angry, exactly. It was worse than that. I'd gone quiet. When I told them I wouldn't be coming home, Mom texted back, "That's okay, sweetie. Rest up. Let us know if you need anything." And that was it. No follow-up. No questions. Just another reminder that they were perfectly comfortable with me out of sight. That silence used to hurt. Now it just felt expected. The day after that text, I finally called Aunt Denise, my dad's sister. She'd always been the only person in the family who noticed things others ignored. The kind of person who mailed handwritten birthday cards and remembered which books I was reading even when we hadn't spoken in months. I hadn't told her about the college fund. Not yet. We talked for half an hour before I brought it up. I didn't know how to say it, so I just said it flat. They gave my tuition fund to Evan. For his custody lawyer. It's gone. There was a long pause. Then, very softly, "You're kidding me." I said nothing. She didn't ask me if I was sure. She didn't tell me I was being dramatic or that there must be more to the story. She just breathed out once, hard and angry, and said, "That's a betrayal." It was the first time someone used that word. Betrayal. I hadn't allowed myself to frame it that way. I'd called it a decision, a sacrifice, a shift in priorities. I told myself it was about limited resources, that they were just overwhelmed. But hearing her say it with that kind of certainty, that what they'd done wasn't just disappointing, but wrong, was like getting permission to feel the full weight of it. She offered to help with tuition, even said she'd co-sign a loan if I needed it. But I turned her down. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about something else, something harder to name. Maybe it was the principle. Maybe it was pride. Maybe I just needed to prove, mostly to myself, that I could do this without them. After that call, something shifted in me. I started watching my family differently. When I did go home again, I didn't engage. I cooked dinner, washed the dishes, folded laundry. But I barely spoke unless I had to. I watched my mother laugh at Evan's jokes like she hadn't rewritten my future over breakfast. I watched my dad rub his temples when Evan mentioned new legal bills and then quietly offer to cover them. I watched Evan tell a story about his ex throwing his PlayStation out the window, and I listened to my parents laugh like it was charming. They never noticed I wasn't laughing. They never noticed I wasn't really there. That was when it hit me. I'd been background to them for so long, they didn't know what it looked like when I stopped performing. I had played the same role my entire life, the competent one, the helper, the fixer, the invisible backbone. The one who kept her needs small, who never interrupted, who made things easier for everyone else. And in return, I was overlooked. Taken for granted. Used. I started testing the edges of that invisibility. I stopped offering help. Stopped refilling the coffee. Stopped asking questions at dinner. And nothing changed. The rhythm went on without me. One afternoon, I sat in the living room while my mom folded laundry on the couch. She was talking to Evan, who was pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. Something about missed payments and documentation. At one point, she sighed and said, "It's always something, isn't it?" Evan laughed. "You wouldn't believe how much I'm juggling right now." "You're doing your best," she said, gently. "That's all anyone can ask." I was sitting 5 feet away, holding a folder of scholarship applications I'd printed out at the library. I'd been spending every weekend combing the internet for private funds, essay contests, grant programs, anything with even a slim chance. I had a spreadsheet of deadlines and dollar amounts taped to the wall above my desk. I was doing my best too. But no one had said that to me. That night, I went back upstairs and sat on the floor. Just sat there, lights off, door closed, the folder open in front of me. I flipped through the applications, one by one. I was tired. Not the kind of tired you can fix with sleep. The kind of tired that comes from knowing you're alone in something you were promised you wouldn't be alone in. I wasn't looking for pity. I wasn't even looking for fairness anymore. I just wanted clarity. I wanted to stop pretending we were still the kind of family where I could expect certain things. We weren't. Maybe we never were. A few days later, Aunt Denise mailed me a care package. No money. Just a hand-knit scarf, a tin of loose-leaf tea, and a note that said, "You've always been the one with grit. Let them underestimate you. It's your superpower." I pinned the note to my wall. It reminded me of something else, something my roommate Sam had said a few months earlier during a late-night cram session. I'd been complaining about an essay prompt I thought was condescending. She looked at me, dead serious, and said, "You realize you're the kind of person they build stories around, right? The ones who get dismissed until they're impossible to ignore." I hadn't believed her then. I wasn't sure I fully believed her now. But the idea stayed with me. I didn't make a big scene. I didn't explode or confront anyone. That wasn't how I operated. But I did make a decision. A quiet one. The kind that doesn't look like much until it's already changed everything. I wasn't going to let them write the story for me anymore. Not as the side character. Not as the support beam. From now on, I'd write it myself. And it would start with a letter. I spent 3 weeks writing the letter, even though it was barely 2 pages. I kept it simple. No loaded language. No metaphors. Just a list. One side for what I had given. The other for what they had taken. Time. Money. Quiet. Compliance. The hours I worked in high school to cover my own books. The holidays I spent doing dishes while Evan napped off hangovers on the couch. The conversations I swallowed to keep peace. The tuition I never got. On the other side, the college fund. The birthdays skipped. The broken promises. The legal bills for Evan's custody battle. The housing assistance when he couldn't keep a job. The emotional labor they never even noticed. And beneath it all, the pattern, what they chose, over and over again. I printed it on regular printer paper at the library. Folded it cleanly. Wrote for Mom and Dad in blue ink at the top. That was all. I didn't tell anyone, not Clara, not Sam, not Aunt Denise. I wanted it to be mine. Not performative. Not rehearsed. Just the truth, laid down where they couldn't ignore it anymore. The next family dinner was at my grandparents' house. It was some combination of a spring holiday, an early birthday for Evan's youngest, and a vague excuse to all be together again. Mom texted me twice to confirm I was coming. It'll mean a lot to everyone. Translation: don't embarrass us by not showing up. I said I'd be there. I wore a dark blue button-down and jeans. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would draw attention. When I walked into the house, the smell of baked ziti and pot roast hit me like a wave of memory. Everything looked exactly the same cream-colored walls, same cluster of jackets over the banister, same stack of outdated magazines by the door. Evan was already there, laughing with a beer in one hand, one of his kids tugging on the other. Mom hovered nearby with a bowl of salad, and Dad was in the living room talking to Grandpa, probably about taxes or the stock market. No one asked how school was going. I waited until after dinner. The plates had been cleared. People were still lingering over dessert. My cousin Sarah was spoon-feeding pudding to her toddler. The room had that bloated, sleepy energy where everyone was halfway into conversation, but no one really wanted to get up yet. That's when I stood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't clink a glass. I just walked around the table and placed the folded letter in front of my mother. "This is for you," I said. "For both of you." Mom blinked, caught off guard. Dad looked up from his coffee. Evan snorted under his breath. "What's this?" she asked, already unfolding it. No one else noticed at first. But the energy shifted fast. Mom's eyes scanned the page, and within seconds her mouth opened in shock. She handed it to Dad without finishing. He read it slower, his expression darkening by degrees. At one point, he looked up and stared at me like I was a stranger. "Are you serious with this?" he asked. I didn't answer. "This is not how you handle things," Mom said sharply. "You don't air grievances at a family dinner." "I didn't air anything," I said. "I handed you a letter." Quietly. "You want to talk about what you didn't get?" Dad's voice was rising now. "We gave you everything we could. Food, a home, stability. You gave Evan a lawyer," I said. "You gave him my college fund." Evan laughed again. "Jesus, still on that?" I turned to him, but not fully. You didn't even say thank you. Thank you for what? Your big donation to the custody fund. He shook his head. I didn't ask for that. You didn't have to. Mom stood up. Okay, that's enough. You've made your point. No, I said. I don't think I have. Because every time I brought this up, every time I asked about the fund, about what was happening, I got told not to worry. I got told we'll figure it out. But you had already figured it out. You just didn't tell me. You were doing fine. Mom's voice cracked. You always figure things out. We thought that I didn't matter. I said. That I wouldn't notice? There was a beat of silence. Grandma was watching now, her hands folded in her lap. My cousin Sarah had gone quiet. Even the toddler had stopped fussing. Dad's face was red. You want to embarrass us in front of the whole family? I didn't bring this to the table, I said. I've been carrying it quietly for a year. This is the first time I've said anything. You've always been so ungrateful, Mom said. We do our best. That's what parents do. No, I said. What parents do is invest in their kids. All their kids. Not just the ones who keep failing. Evan muttered something under his breath. I didn't catch it. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I looked at both of them one last time. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about being seen. And I don't think either of you have seen me in a long, long time. Then I left. No dramatic exit. No door slam. Just picked up my bag, walked out of the dining room, and out into the cold night air. I didn't look back. No one followed me. I didn't drive home. I went to Clara's. She was out of town, but she'd left me a key in case I needed to crash. I let myself in, turned off my phone, and sat on the couch in the dark. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry anymore either. I just felt done. Sometimes, clarity doesn't feel like a revelation. It feels like a door locking behind you, and realizing you're finally safe on the other side. I didn't go back to my dorm after the dinner. I moved in with Zoe. She wasn't just a friend. She was the kind of person who saw through people fast and called it out even faster. We'd met in a statistics class the year before and bonded over a shared hatred of group projects and cafeteria food. When I showed up at her apartment that night with nothing but a backpack and a crumpled letter in my pocket, she didn't ask a single question. Just handed me a blanket and said, "Couch is yours. Shower's clean. I have leftover pad thai." That was the first night I really slept in months. The next morning, I texted the campus housing office and canceled my dorm lease. It meant forfeiting my deposit, but I didn't care. I couldn't stand the idea of going back to that cramped room, to the life I'd built by pretending everything was fine. Instead, I took on a full-time job at a local print shop off campus. It was noisy and chaotic and smelled like toner and burned paper, but it paid decently, and the manager didn't care about my class schedule because I didn't have one anymore. I took a break from school. Not forever, just long enough to get my feet under me again. I told the registrar I was taking a leave of absence for personal reasons, and that was that. No fanfare. No one at home knew. I didn't tell them. They didn't ask. Within a week, the messages started. First from Mom. A long text that started with, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," and ended with, "But you could have brought this to us in a better way." Then another, shorter, "Call us when you're ready." I didn't reply. Then Dad emailed me, of all things. He attached a PDF of a bank statement showing a new savings account labeled Michelle Fund. It had $500 in it. No note, no explanation, just the name and the number. They were trying. Or maybe they were performing. Either way, it wasn't enough. I didn't want a gesture. I wanted accountability. And they weren't ready for that. Then came the Facebook posts. I didn't see them directly, Zoe did. She read one aloud over dinner one night. "Sometimes you raise a child with everything you have, and they still decide you're not good enough," she quoted. #heartbreak. #family is complicated. I set my fork down. "Let me guess," accompanied by a picture of Evan's kids. She nodded. "And a Bible verse about forgiveness." "Of course." I muted her. I muted them all. Meanwhile, Evan lost his job again. He'd been working part-time at a motorcycle repair shop, but apparently he missed too many shifts. Or argued with the manager. Or maybe just didn't show up. The story kept changing. The lawyer dropped him too, some dispute over missed payments and unreturned calls. Mom tried to spin it like the firm was unethical. They never really cared about his case, she told someone in the comments section of one of her posts. I stopped watching. For the first time in my life, I wasn't orbiting around their mess. I wasn't checking in or helping or translating their choices into something more palatable. I just let them deal with it. And the silence from me must have felt louder than anything I could have said, because the messages got more desperate. Please talk to us. Your father is really hurt. Evan is struggling and could use your support. Don't let one disagreement tear the whole family apart. Disagreement. That was the word that broke me. They still didn't understand. Or they didn't want to. They wanted me back in my role. Quiet. Helpful. Forgiving. But I was done performing. So I stayed at Zoe's. I opened a new checking account with only my name on it. I saved every extra dollar from the print shop job. I picked up weekend shifts at a nearby bakery for cash under the table. I taught myself how to meal prep for $20 a week, how to fix a broken space heater, how to file my own taxes. It wasn't easy. There were nights I went to bed with a stomachache because I couldn't afford a full dinner. Days when my fingers cramped from folding paper and lifting reams. Mornings when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing walking away from the education I'd worked so hard for. But it was mine. And for the first time, I started thinking about what I wanted, outside of being seen, outside of being chosen. Not, how do I make them proud, but what would make me proud of me? I still wanted school. But I didn't want to go back just to prove a point. I wanted to go back when I was ready, on my own terms. So I spent that year building toward it. I applied for scholarships every month. Wrote essays late at night on Zoe's couch. One of them won me $1,000. Another led to a phone interview with a small nonprofit that offered microgrants for first-gen college students. When they asked about my financial history, I told the truth. My family had the money, but chose to spend it elsewhere. I'm funding it myself now. The woman on the line didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "You're exactly the kind of student we created this for." By June, I had saved enough to cover one semester of tuition without loans. Not including textbooks. Not including fees. But it was a start. Zoe threw me a celebration in our apartment. Streamers, a homemade cake, and one of those plastic trophies from the dollar store that said #OneBoss in gold lettering. It was the best party I'd ever had. My parents didn't know. They were still trying to bait me back into conversation. Let's have a family meeting. We can explain everything if you'll just listen. You don't understand what we were going through. But I did. I understood perfectly. They were going through the consequences of not having me there to buffer everything. They had no one to explain away Evan's behavior to relatives. No one to help with paperwork or manage the emotional cleanup when things went sideways. They were used to having a daughter who was useful, not one who was angry or absent. And without me, the cracks were showing. I wasn't happy about it. I wasn't sitting back with popcorn, hoping they'd fall apart. I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be their fixer. I couldn't be the one who made everyone else look better by comparison. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in distance, in quiet, in control. And in that quiet, I started becoming someone else. Not the good daughter. Not the second choice. Not the one who made herself small so everyone else could feel bigger. I was just me. And that finally was enough. 6 months after I walked out of that dinner, my father showed up at the print shop. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was behind the counter, restocking ink cartridges and trying to ignore the buzzing of the front door bell every time someone walked in for a passport photo or last-minute business cards. I looked up and there he was, same coat he'd worn to every school conference, same tired expression that used to mean he'd had a long day. But this time, it was something else. He didn't look annoyed. He looked like someone trying to remember how to ask for something. "I didn't come to fight," he said, raising one hand slightly like he was surrendering. I didn't move. Just waited. "She's not sleeping," he said. "Your mother." The words sat there for a second. Like they were supposed to mean something. "She's convinced she lost you forever," he added. "I told her you just needed time." I looked down at the box of cartridges in my hand, deliberately closed it, then walked around the counter. "I'm on break in 5, I said. "You wanna wait? We can get coffee next door." He nodded. "I'll wait." The coffee shop was one of those quiet places with soft lighting and fake plants. No music, just the low hum of the espresso machine and clinking ceramic mugs. We sat in a booth in the back. I didn't offer to pay for his drink. He didn't ask. He talked first. About the family. About Evan. About how things haven't been easy and your mother misses you. Not once did he say they were sorry. Not once did he bring up the letter. He circled it like a pilot looking for a place to land, but never quite touching down. Finally, I interrupted him. "What do you want from me?" He looked surprised. "I just want you to talk to her." I nodded slowly. "Just coffee." He nodded back. The next day, I met her at the same cafe. She was already there when I arrived, hands wrapped tightly around a mug, as if it was the only thing holding her together. I sat down without a hug, without small talk. She cried within the first 2 minutes. "I didn't realize how much it hurt you," she said, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. "I truly didn't. I mean, you've always been so strong." I stayed quiet. "I thought you'd understand," she continued. "That Evan needed it more. That you'd make do. You always make do." There it was. The thesis statement of my entire childhood. I didn't comfort her. I didn't reach across the table or offer kind words. I just waited until she was done. "I'm not cutting you off," I said. "But I'm not coming back either." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm not coming back to the house. To holidays. To pretending everything's okay. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be a new one." Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "I'm not your helper. I'm not the fallback plan when Evan burns another bridge. I'm not going to sit there while you pretend we're fine. If you want to know me, really know me, it has to start with that." She nodded slowly, like she was translating what I'd said into a language she was still learning. "And Evan?" she asked softly. "Not my problem," I said. "He never was. You just made him mine." It wasn't cruel. It was clean. We sat in silence for a while after that. She asked what I'd been doing, where I was living, how work was going. I answered simply. No details. Just enough to let her know I was surviving. When we stood to leave, she reached for a hug. I let her. Briefly. On the way out, she said, "I hope someday we can get back to the way things used to be." I stopped walking. "That's not the goal." She looked confused. "I don't want what we had," I said. "What we had is what broke this." After that, things didn't magically repair. There was no movie montage reconciliation. What happened was slower, quieter. Emails sometimes. A card in the mail. She sent me a pair of gloves when it snowed in November. Didn't ask for anything in return. Dad sent a check in December. Just $50. No note. I didn't cash it. Evan tried calling once. I didn't pick up. A week later, I got a text, "Whatever. Guess you're too good for family now." I blocked the number. That winter, I reapplied to school. A different one this time. Smaller. More affordable. Closer to where I lived now. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Zoe. I wanted it to be mine. I wanted the acceptance letter to land in my hands with no strings attached to anyone else's expectations. When it did, I bought a cupcake from the grocery store and ate it alone on the fire escape. I started classes the following fall. New professors. New peers. No baggage. I kept the boundaries firm. My parents knew I was back in school, but they didn't ask for details. I didn't offer them. We were speaking again, cautiously, like people testing the ice under their feet. They tried to visit once. I said no. Instead, I sent a photo of my student ID. Just that. No caption. Let them figure out the rest. That was the deal now. I'd let them in, but only on my terms. And if they wanted to stay in my life, they'd have to relearn who I was without the role they'd written for me. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The point had already been made. A year later, I started school again. Not the dream school. Not the one with the ivy-covered walls and the 10-story library I used to imagine studying in as a teenager. This one was smaller. Public. Half the buildings looked like old strip malls, and the library shared space with the cafeteria. But it was mine. I took 2 classes at first. Paid out of pocket. No loans, no cosigners. I worked mornings at the print shop and evenings at the bakery, alternating shifts depending on who needed me more. My apartment was the size of a storage unit, 1 window, 1 burner that only half worked, and a radiator that hissed like it had an opinion about everything. Still, it was the first place I'd ever lived that felt entirely like mine. No family photos. No passive-aggressive sticky notes. No adjusting myself to fit the temperature of the room. I bought my own lamp. My own set of cheap dishes. A second-hand rug that didn't match anything. It was quiet. A little lonely sometimes. But it was solid. Grounded. I could exhale there. My parents sent a birthday card in April. Blue envelope. Slanted handwriting. Inside, hope you're doing well. We love you. Let us know if you need anything. A check for $20 was folded into the corner. I didn't cash it. But I didn't throw it away either. It sat in the top drawer of my desk for months, like a souvenir from a version of them I didn't believe in anymore. We talked every now and then. Mostly by email. Short exchanges. Weather updates, photos of the dog, vague mentions of extended family drama. Every message came with that careful tone, like they were walking through a room full of glass. They didn't bring up the past. Neither did I. It wasn't cold. Just formal. Controlled. Like coworkers who used to be close, but now only communicate through bullet points and polite reminders. I didn't mind. Evan got engaged again. That made 4. Her name was Carissa, or maybe it was Clarissa. I didn't ask. I got the invitation in the mail, gold foil lettering, generic script. No personal note. Just hope to see you there, tucked into the RSVP card. I didn't go. I sent a card that said, wishing you both peace. No signature. Just that. There were no angry follow-up texts. No guilt trips. Not even a passive-aggressive comment from Mom about family priorities. I think they knew, finally, that I wasn't bluffing. That I meant it when I said I wasn't coming back to the role they'd written for me. The biggest change wasn't in them. It was in me. I stopped waiting for them to understand. Stopped hoping they'd wake up one morning and suddenly realize how much they'd asked me to carry. How long they'd expected me to live quietly in the shadows while Evan burned through every opportunity handed to him and then came back for mine. I stopped looking for closure. It wasn't coming. Instead, I built something else. Not a grand life. Not some glossy version of success I could post online to prove a point. Just stability. Self-respect. A routine that didn't require me to shrink myself to keep the peace. I still had hard days. Nights when I lay awake doing math in my head, trying to figure out if I could afford both groceries and textbooks next week. Mornings when I scrolled through photos of classmates in cap and gown and felt that sting of delay, that ache of almost. But those feelings came and went. What stayed was the clarity. The understanding that walking away wasn't selfish. It was necessary. That choosing myself, really choosing myself, meant letting go of their approval. That justice, for people like me, rarely shows up with applause or apologies. It shows up as silence. As space. As the absence of chaos. I used to think speaking up was the brave thing. That handing them that letter at the dinner table was the moment I claimed my power. And in some ways, it was. But what came after was braver. The refusal to be pulled back in. The commitment to boundaries even when they softened their voices. The understanding that peace wasn't something they could give me or take from me. It was something I had to build from scratch. And I did. Class by class. Paycheck by paycheck. Day by day. Sometimes Zoe would ask if I missed them. I always answered the same way. I miss who I wanted them to be. Because I did. I missed the version of my parents I believed in for so long. The ones who saw me. Chose me. Treated me like more than a utility. That version never really existed, at least not in full. But I loved it all the same. Letting go of that fantasy hurt more than anything. But it also made room for something else. Something real. When I submitted my first research paper that fall, I printed an extra copy and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk. The title wasn't impressive. The formatting was clunky. But it was mine. Underneath it, I taped a quote from a book Zoe lent me during that first messy year. You do not have to be everything to be worthy of something. I read it every morning before class. And when I got the final grade, an A-, I didn't text anyone. I walked down to the bakery, bought a slice of carrot cake, sat on the bench outside and ate it slowly in the October cold. No fanfare, no witnesses, just me. And that quiet, steady truth. Sometimes justice isn't a speech. It's an exit. And the life you build after. Thanks for listening. Have you ever had to cut ties or set hard boundaries with your own family? What finally pushed you to say enough? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one. And if this hit close to home, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true stories about choosing peace over pleasing people. Until next time, protect your energy.